Hello. This afternoon, in fact, afternoon in Europe, for the last session of the Digital Publishing Summit, we'll discuss accessible audiobooks. Isn't an audiobook always accessible? Well, in fact, not even in the case of fiction books, and still less in the case of complex ebooks like academic content. So to discuss what are accessible ebooks and what we do
this afternoon.
Sorry.
In fact, afternoon in
Yes. So let me introduce two experts in this field. Farah Little is the content coordinator at NELS in Canada. She manages digital book production, acquisition, technical services, and other various projects. And she lives in Vancouver. This is why we are having this session at 6 p.m. in Paris. Danny Faris is a software engineer and an accessibility tester for NELS also. In the page related to this session on Swapcard, you'll find links to two previous presentations on W3C audiobook, this format. So one by Wendy Red from Kobo, and one by Wendy and Marisa De Meglio from Daisy. These presentations will give you a technical overview of the format, which will not be covered by Farah and Danny today. So I will share my screen and launch the video.
And welcome to our presentation on accessible audiobooks. I'm Farah, and I work with NELS, Canada's digital public library for people with print disabilities. So by print disability, we mean an impairment that makes it impossible or difficult for someone to use print materials. That could be blindness, low vision, or the inability to hold a book. So in these cases, audio becomes a super important way of reading and getting information.
Hello, I'm Danny. I also work with NELS, helping publishers produce more accessible ebooks.
And today we want to talk about what an accessible audiobook is and how it's now finally possible to make a mainstream commercial audiobook that's accessible to everyone, thanks to the new audiobook specification. We won't dive into the technical side of production in this talk, but are happy to talk about that with you later. So as a bit of background, at NELS we have been turning print books and ebooks into audiobooks for quite some time. Typically, we have been converting books into audiobooks in the Daisy format, which is a specialized format read using specialized technology.
Back in 1996, the Daisy Consortium drafted a specification to present digital audiobooks on CD. Compact discs were a pretty novel idea in those days, and the clear sound offered by a digital recording could not be matched by a cassette. But Daisy took the standard much further, offering a way to read, navigate, and understand complex audio content on a digital stage. For the first time, chapters had names, readers could move through them by phrase or paragraph, and footnotes could be reviewed or ignored. The spec was adopted by those serving people with print disabilities and quickly became the alternate format of choice for both ebooks and audiobooks. My first audiobook came on a cassette tape in an alternate format called 4-track. It could only be read with specialized technology that supported slow-speed tapes like this expensive, handy cassette player. The first Daisy books were distributed on CD, but were soon offered in digital cartridges and electronic download. Even so, specialized technology like the Victor Reader was still required to play them. Players got smaller and came down in price, like this inexpensive model, and eventually moved to tablets and smartphones. But because Daisy is an alternate format, a specialized e-reader is still required to listen to accessible audiobooks. Mainstream publications aren't exactly ideal either. Most of today's commercial audiobooks consist of a set of loose audio tracks bundled in an archive. No clear standards are in play, so each producer packages things a little differently. The resulting experience is unpredictable. Books may be difficult to locate, load, and play. Tracks may play out of order, with names that give little clue as to their content. It is not possible to skip logically through the track, and many books will not read continuously to the end. Here, I'll show you an example. I have a book loaded on my Victor Reader. It's a really good book, but the alphabetized file names make it play out of order. Let's quickly spin through it.
This concludes the reading of the...
So the book starts with the conclusion. The next chapter
MP3
is just called 2,
For Sloan and Alexander.
and it gives the dedication.
3
The next track is called 3,
The Patch. The Peep.
and gives the title of the book.
4 MP3
4
1.
is chapter 1,
5
and
MP3
5
Chapter 10.
is chapter 10. It's a bit chaotic for a novel, but devastating for research material. There's only one level of navigation, so readers are either skipping through dozens of small sections to find the next chapter, or fast-forwarding in time increments to find a certain place in a lengthy track. There are no image descriptions, and footnotes, if they're included at all, play at the end like a gigantic run-on sentence. The more complex the content is, the more cumbersome it becomes to navigate. These problems are exactly what DAISY addressed in its Talking Book standard. But because DAISY is a specialized format, books are time-consuming to produce, expensive to read, and limited in availability. The new audiobook specification, however, changes the landscape entirely. It combines the best features of DAISY with the ease of commercial publishing, eliminating barriers and exposing advanced accessibility features. For the first time in history, audiobooks, like ebooks, have the chance to be born accessible. We're talking about an audiobook so easy to produce and so accessible to everyone that an alternate format is no longer required. But don't take my word for it. Let's take a look.
This is the home screen of Thorium e-Reader, a project of the European Digital Reading Lab. Thorium may be the most accessible EPUB reader for Windows, but it also supports the new audiobook format. During this demonstration, I'm using the NVDA screen reader, so you can hear just how accessible the experience is. So let's jump down to the Resume Listening tab.
Main content, resume listening, heading level 2.
And take a look at one of these audiobooks we've said so much about.
Link the abridged Blue Fairy book with synchronized narration and relaying.
When I press enter, Thorium Reader will continue narration right where it left off last time.
Interlab Thorium Reader.
Do not thus afflict yourself, my good master. You have nothing else to do but to give me a bag, and get a pair of boots made for me, that I may scamper through the dirt and brambles, and you shall see that you have not so bad a portion in me as you imagine.
Toolbar.
I just paused the audio. In addition to being able to open books from a completely accessible interface, Thorium has many other controls that allow us to skip through the track and the book. We can move forward through the track by simply pressing the forward button.
The cat's master did into his bag, apartment, and made a present of these to the king. In that part I shall show you.
But
we can skip even to the previous track.
But previous.
By pressing previous.
Rumpelstiltskin of the Blue Fairy book. This is a LibriVox recording. LibriVox.
Of course, there's also a seat bar to select a certain position in the track, and the display showing how much of the track we've listened to. These are great features, but admittedly, ones that are commonly found in well-designed reading systems with today's commercial audiobooks. Where it gets exciting is when we open the navigation pane.
Reading view menu navigation landmark list with 5 items toggle button not pressed table of contents. Pressed.
The table of contents is now showing the 5 chapters in the Blue Fairy book, or at least this edition of it. NVDA will read the chapter names as we cycle through them with the arrow keys. Note how each title clearly describes what is found in that chapter, unlike our previous demonstration.
Table of contents list with 5 items: link Cinderella or The Little Glass Slipper. Link Rumpelstiltskin. Link The Master Cat or Puss in Boots.
The Master Cat, that's the chapter we were reading.
Link Hansel and Gretel. Link The History of Jack the Giant Killer.
Each one of these titles is set up as a link, so all we have to do to navigate to any chapter in the book is move to that entry with our arrow keys,
Link Hansel and Gretel,
and press enter.
Main contents mainland.
Thorium Reader demonstrates how easily audiobooks in the new format can be read and navigated. It is a tremendous advancement in audiobooks, and we're excited to see what developments will be made in the future.
Thorium gives us a glimpse of how simple an audiobook can be to use. This is great for novels, but for research material, richer navigation is usually rather important. Recommendations for this type of control exist in LPF audiobooks, but no one has quite stepped up to the plate to actually make such a book yet. So, while we wait, let's show you what this looks like in a DAISY audiobook. A terrific book called Untamed is open on my iPhone in an app called Easy Reader. In this demo, VoiceOver will read the screen for us.
Play. Untamed. The Wild Life of Jane Goodall.
First, let's look at the table of contents.
Book navigation. Button. Selected. Headings. Button. 1 of 3. Untamed. Forward. Level 1. 3 meters 2s. Jane's favorite dog. Level 2. 1 meter 19s.
This list of sections shows 2 levels of headings. We can still move to a certain chapter, but we also have the option of jumping right to a section within that chapter if we want.
Jane's play. Jane's favorite dog. A black dog with a white blaze on his chest. Rusty lived at a hotel that stood next to Jane's house.
We can also navigate by page.
Book navigation. Button. Selected. Headings. Button. Pages. Button. 2. Selected. Pages. 13. 12. 11. 11. 11. Play. Use the rotor to access 15 seconds. 2 minutes. 5 minutes. Book default. Page. Heading 1 only. Heading 1 and 2 only.
In this book, the narrator has read out picture captions.
Play. Page 11. Narrator's note. The photograph is captioned, Young Jane Goodall atop Daniel at Bushells Riding Stable in Bournemouth, England, where she first...
If the book and reading system are well designed, readers can choose to skip the reading of page numbers and image descriptions. This is one of the hallmarks of a truly accessible audiobook. Lastly, let's take a look at the EndNote section.
Book navigation. Button. Headings. Button. 1 of 3. Selected. Headings. 1. Introduction. Level 1. Rows 14. Rows 22 to rows 31 to 39 of 44. Rows 36 to 44 of 44. Find out more. Notes. Level 2. 5 meters 59. Notes. Note. Play. Use. Notes. Chapter 1. Childhood. Page 10. If you really want something. Dale Peterson. In Jane Goodall, page 58.
This is a fairly common approach to audiobooks. As you can imagine, though, navigating to an EndNote, then back to the original place of reading, is time-consuming and cumbersome. But if each note is carefully tagged, it can be read or skipped during the reading of the main narrative. This feature is available in DAISY and is proposed for LPF as well. Features like this become even more exciting when text is synchronized with audio. This can actually make the tagging of notes, page numbers, and image descriptions even easier to implement. Such elements are usually clearly identified in the text, and that identification often flows through to the way audio is presented. Today, books like this are extremely rare, but if producers truly embrace LPF, it could do much more than ensure chapters are presented in order. It could create a robust, inclusive reading experience that no reader, visual or not, has ever tried before.
So thanks, Danny. Believe it or not, there's a quote in the new audiobook spec, actually, that stuck out for me and that I think you've just illustrated perfectly. It says, the history of the audiobook is rooted in the world of accessibility. We've definitely come a long way since the days of talking book cassettes to downloadable DAISY audiobooks, and now potentially an accessible mainstream audiobook capable of syncing with text and including navigational points to all sections of a book and other supplemental content. The whole audiobook experience is so much cheaper, easier, and smoother now, thanks to development work done for and by people with print disabilities. And that Thorium demo was really cool. we get a lot of questions from publishers about how they can incorporate trickier content or supplemental content like images and image descriptions or extra data like footnotes and endnotes into their audiobooks. I'm wondering how the new LPF audiobook, let's call it that, lets you include this kind of content and why it's not possible currently with a commercial format like MP3.
You bet. So the beauty of the new format is its ability to identify special clips of audio to the reading system. So when an e-reader encounters a sentence in the track that's marked as an image description, for example, it can either play it or skip it, depending on the user's preference. These skippable structures are easily expanded to encompass footnotes, sidebars, even tables and graphs. This is all thanks to the proposed sync media overlay. See, at its core, new audiobooks are still a collection of MP3 tracks, but the optional overlay, which points to hundreds of sentences throughout the track, has the ability to flag certain audio clips as bonus content. Finally, all the navigation features of EPUB are being brought to today's audiobooks.
So finally, we have this mainstream audiobook format that can do everything a DAISY audiobook can do. Instead of producing DAISY books for one segment of the population and commercial MP3 books for another segment, now we have a single format that is capable of meeting everyone's needs and doesn't require any special reading system to read. You know, there's no more need for two formats. We just have this single super format, which is great. It makes total sense. I guess I'm just worried that publishers may not have the time or resources to learn how to make LPF audiobooks. I mean, it's taken people a decade to get up to speed with making accessible ebooks in EPUB format. So how is this audiobook format going to be any less complicated to implement? Will it be?
It's a great point. Unlike printed text, though, the spoken word is inherently accessible already. So we've complicated the process somewhat with digital delivery and graphical e-readers. But if the book will play in order, it's already mostly usable to everyone. And if producers are happy with that level of navigation, they can leave it at that. In their most basic form, LPF audiobooks just bundle the audio tracks in a predictable way, along with an index to ensure things work right. That's it. So they're not difficult or time-consuming to produce. Oh, there's always the option of including bonus content or synchronizing some text with the audio or throwing in some skippable image descriptions. But no one has to. All you need is an index, and that can already be generated automatically with a free tool, and you're ready to publish an accessible audiobook. It's as simple as that.
Cool, that's a relief. I mean, as you just said, even having only a robust table of contents that points to sections within an audio file will be a big improvement and will be really useful for people. I guess that leads kind of to my next question, which is, are there tools that will do all that for me? I don't want to be fiddling with code.
No one expects you to write the navigation files from scratch, don't worry. And there's no need whatsoever to learn code to produce an LPF audiobook. The process to produce an audiobook in the new format is extremely simple for a computer program, and 2 projects have already been released to accomplish it. As the standard gains popularity, many more tools and readers should follow in the near future. Last year, Nels developed an automated converter that adds navigation features to audiobooks in our library. This application greatly simplifies and streamlines the production of DAISY talking books, and we hope to add support for LPF in the coming months.
Nice. And yeah, I've also heard word that Kobo and Google will be accepting this audiobook format by the end of this summer 2020. Once that happens, I think things will snowball. Other retailers will accept it, more reading systems will start supporting it, and more publishers will start producing it. So with some simple production tools already available, like you mentioned, and more in the works, plus reading systems like Thorium that already support it, I feel more confident that we can maybe retire earlier than we thought.
Maybe.
Thank you everyone for listening. We hope you've learned a thing or two about audiobooks and what makes them accessible and not so accessible. We also hope that you seriously consider looking into and adopting the LPF format for your audiobook distribution. Audiobooks, like ebooks, can be born accessible too, with just a little bit of effort. If you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat box here, or email us at support, SUPPORT, @nels.ca, nnels.ca, or you can find us on Twitter at nnelsca. I will also mention that NELS offers audiobook and ebook consultation and conversion services if you need more help making accessible audiobooks.
Great. So we can put our mics and video on now. Thank you very much, Danny. Thank you very much, Farah. So we had some comments from the audience saying great presentation, great job. So first, thank you. Then some questions. I will start with something about trade publishing, which is because we hope that we've got here a universal format between trade publishers who would output it and associations like yours who would do the same. So could we imagine that trade publishers would make half of the way, as Danny said, meaning releasing audiobooks with proper metadata, a table of content, maybe a page list, and let specialized associations add the synchronized media structure, which adds fine-grained navigation, image descriptions, navigation footnotes, navigable footnotes, escapable data table, maybe for blind users. Can we imagine that we've got half of the work made by the different organizations?
We could imagine that, but I don't think it's ideal. Danny, maybe you want to speak a bit more to that. But I think the idea here is that this is a mainstream format that, and we're trying to put businesses and organizations like ours that have to spend our time making alternate formats that work for people out of business. So now that there's a format that lets publishers do everything that Daisy book producers have been doing over the years, why not let them just run with that and take it as far as they can? They're the ones making the content and the books, and they're in the best position to add all the great features they want to their content and make it available. I don't know, Danny, what do you think?
I agree. The neat thing about the new audiobook format is even if a producer does just, as you say, add a table of content so that chapters are properly named and playing in order, yes, the ability exists for someone to add additional features to that book. So it's already better than the book we have today where it's just about MP3 files. Just having metadata is huge for discovery, and it really starts missing many books can be found. One to remember is the extent that we're synchronized narrator, tagging footnotes, sidebars. These are very important conditions for non-traditional readers, but they're also a huge benefit for your traditional reader who's navigating the book with a mouse, reading it on screen, being able to click a footnote and having that pop up right away, or being able to check the spelling of words because the sentence is being displayed on screen. Those are really important features for all readers. So if producers are willing and able to add that to the content, not only is it born accessible, but it's going to be much more popular for everyone. So it's a good news story all the way around.
Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah, these features are useful for everyone. I mean, being able to skip footnotes, for example. I don't want to be hearing someone speak a footnote in the middle of a sentence or even end of a sentence in the middle of a book. It's just awkward. You know, and I'm sure publishers would want the user listener experience to be as best as it can be. And this is something they can do now with the new audiobook format. So, and it benefits everyone, not just people with print disabilities.
Cool. Another question about production of accessible audiobooks in Nels, for example. Don't you fear that the large number of DAISY devices which are on the market today, those specialized devices, and which only deal with the DAISY format, and also the practice of the associations like yours, which is to release the DAISY format of talking books, don't you think that it will slow in practice the progression of W3C audiobooks outside the trade publishing, in fact? Because it seems that there is a specialized format, and it's always difficult to make it replaced by a generic format if it works, which is the case of the DAISY talking book format.
Sorry, Laurent.
Okay.
Danny, maybe go for it.
I was not clear. So today, you are producing the DAISY talking book format.
Yes.
And there are devices which read it without any problem. Tomorrow, there is this new W3C format that comes, and we can hope that the trade publishers will take it. But will you take it? Will you release audiobooks in this format?
Yeah, totally. Why not? Yeah.
Because
probably in the meanwhile, while people are catching up, and once everyone's adopted it, no, like we obviously wouldn't need to produce it, because an accessible format would be out there in the world that would be usable by everyone, ideally. So we wouldn't need to produce it. But I think as we transition, we're gonna be adopting it shortly. And Danny's actually working on a tool right now to output audiobooks in that format.
Okay.
Danny.
Yes, Danny, do you want
Danny, do you want to add something?
Yeah, we touched on it briefly in our presentation, but this specification is so robust and yet at its core so simple to work with. So we're working on a project now where books will be available both in the DAISY format and in the new LPF format. So that gives our patrons a chance to transition from the old format to the new as reading systems add support for it. Here's hoping. But the huge difference here is, as we've touched on, is the new format that's being proposed, and early adopters are starting to jump on board already, is this isn't an alternate format. So hopefully when it continues to become adopted and we start seeing books produced in it, it negates the need to produce an alternate format at all. So yes, there are many devices that support, and in some cases only support DAISY. But it's kind of like when we were talking about trying to produce every book in Braille, because everyone knew Braille and everyone wanted to read books in Braille who was blind, for instance. There's a huge benefit for that, but there isn't as great a need because we have accessible formats now in EPUB. And this audiobook format really has the opportunity to go down the same road and offer one edition of book that everyone can read. And that's the best way to go.
Totally.
Okay, thank you. Good answer. Question from Ted van der Vogt from the National Library of Netherlands. Is it possible to use this synchronized text track to read along with Braille display and/or to be used for text search? Meaning, if you really synchronize text and audio, well, yes, we can imagine that a Braille device can use the text, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's a great way of putting it too. We talked about synchronizing the audio with text, but can we synchronize the text with the audio? And yes, we can. Through the sync media specification, and my understanding is that Thorium is already going down this road so that you can find something and then start narration there, which is brilliant. And yes, text that can be read out by a screen reader, such as NVDA in our demo, can be sent to the Braille display. So yes, absolutely, to both points, you can search for text and start narration with the proposed spec, and you can also review that text with the Braille display in addition to a screen reader. You bet.
And it's true, to complete that answer, that making a text search, a full text search on the text which is associated with the audio is totally feasible. And this is something we are thinking about for Thorium, because this is a totally generic way of using audiobooks. The issue is that we imagine that at the start, there will not be a lot of audiobooks with the text overlay on the market. So to be able to search inside the audio won't be so easy because there will be no content to search.
Yes. Yep, there needs to be the text component to it.
And this is a work. So we hope that at once time there will be some automatic parallelization tools between audio and text, which will ease this process of putting together the text and the audio.
Yes.
Yeah, for sure. Because that would not be fun to do manually. No one will do that.
Yeah. Another question from Ted: how about using the new audiobook format for podcasts with synchronized transcript? Any idea on that? Do you make?
Yeah, I don't see why not. Sorry, Laura?
Do you produce podcasts at Nels?
We don't. No. But Danny, I don't see why you couldn't. I mean, podcast is very similar to an audiobook. It's an audio file, maybe a series of audio files, and you could sync it with the text.
Terrific
using
idea.
the synchronized narration guidelines. So I think it's totally feasible, and it would be well suited to the new audiobook format, I think, because a podcast is all about audio, and the new audiobook format is obviously geared towards audio content. So it makes good sense to me.
Absolutely. There's also a really cool thing in this new spec that allows producers to reference online content to serve as the audio clip. So the download of that podcast in synchronized text and audio would only be a matter of kilobytes, and then it could pull the MP3 tracks for the different sections of the podcast as they're requested in real time from the web. So I agree, it would lend itself beautifully to that.
I had a questions about image descriptions. You talked about image descriptions during the presentation, and in fact, I didn't think about it before, image descriptions inside an audiobook. But how do you think that it should behave for the end user? Meaning, should it be something that is voiced as, here there is an image, but I can describe it if you want, or what would be the user experience for that?
This would be a perfect candidate for skippable structures. So image descriptions can be really important in understanding the content, and they can really add a rich component for all readers. At the same time, if you're reading a narrative, you don't always want a description of the image. Many sighted readers will just glance at, okay, that's cool, and then carry on without disrupting the flow. So this is where we really like to see skippable structures implemented. What that means is the user has the ability to turn on or off the reading of those image descriptions. Just like you don't always want page numbers or footnotes, as we've talked about, disrupting that reading order. So if they're tagged in such a way that the reading system can identify, okay, this next 15 seconds of the audio is an image description, and the user has asked us not to play those, so we're just going to skip that and move down to the next sentence.
So to achieve that, we need a list of tokens, control values, to express that something is an image description that can be set off or on. Something is a page number that can be also set on or off in the reading system. So this is something that we didn't discuss inside W3C, but which is a very interesting idea.
Yeah, I think right now in the synchronized narration guidelines, it was decided to use the ARIA roles, right, as the semantic tags for the content.
Yes.
that would allow the content to be skipped or escaped by the reading system. So yeah, this image description idea, I mean, there's no ARIA role for an image description. So
No.
it would be interesting to see what solution you come up with, but it would definitely be important.
No,
I don't know, Danny, if you have any ideas, but.
Yeah, I think it's the EPUB semantics vocabulary that are applied to elements of the sync media specification with the role attribute to get the granularity to actually specify something as an image description. We can infer it with figure class, but you're right, we don't have a specific specification at this point to indicate an image description that I'm thinking of right off the top of my head.
And you can also, another option is to present the image description in text format as an HTML file and put that in like the reading or in the table of contents maybe, or in the resource list so that the reading system could pull it out and display it to the user. But that wouldn't integrate as well into the flow of the audiobook, but it's an option to present that content.
Maybe we must be careful not to go too far. This is a question asked by Robert Desmond, and it is a great question, I think. He says, given the ability of EPUB with media overlays, with the accessibility enhancements, which are media overlays, to include recorded audio, is there a reason to have the audio spec embedding text? A text which is different from an EPUB embedding some audio. So he says, okay, why embedding a lot of text in an audiobook, as you can already embed audio in an ebook, in fact.
Danny, you had a,
that was the very that was the first thing I asked Wendy is, aren't we reinventing the wheel? So she had a couple of points. First of all, this new LPF specification or proposed specification feels like an audiobook. And if you were to go to a store and purchase an audiobook and they just handed you a paperback with a CD kind of stuck in the front cover, it wouldn't feel like an audiobook. And I think that's one of the really big reasons to consider this new format, is it has that feeling of something different. Now, the media overlays in EPUB are awesome. They're not just like sticking a CD in. I'm not knocking that at all. It's a terrific format. But it is based on a text component with the option of an audio overlay. The LPF format is based on an audiobook presentation with narration and has the ability, or hopefully will have the ability, to synchronize some text and to add some bonus content if they wish. So the production of an LPF audiobook in its simplest form is very straightforward. The production of that in EPUB with media overlays is very complex. So much smaller learning curve. It's a format that's specifically designed for today's audiobooks, and it should be much easier to adopt because the overhead is much smaller. We're talking one navigation file instead of potentially dozens to make it work properly.
Yeah, totally. EPUB wasn't really meant as an audio first format. I think it handles text heavy content a lot better. And like you said, syncing text and audio in EPUB is a bit more complicated. It uses Smile and it's kind of ugly to read, probably to implement. So this new audiobook format, it's really simple. It's just a bunch of audio files. You have your navigation, and then you can do synchronized narration as well, which is actually presented in a really simple, straightforward, human readable JSON file that even I can understand by looking at it. So it's hopefully, because it's a lot simpler, more tools will quickly become available to output it and more people can start using it. Another point that actually Wendy made before when we were chatting about this is that audiobook publishers or producers, they don't have any understanding of EPUB at all. They work in a different world, and to present them with the option of having to now learn about EPUB and use this as their primary format if they want to do things is is a bit much, might be a bit much to ask of people.
And I will also add that an audiobook, before anything technical, is something that you show as in the user interface as an audiobook, meaning there is a cover and there are some controls and you listen first. And the text that could be behind is really behind, meaning that it's not something that is formatted with HTML. Maybe it's maybe only a raw text that can be helpful for something subsidiary to the narration, the audio narration. Totally different from an ebook, which is text first. So your display, your layout is about text. And if there is a narration behind, it is behind. So you see the text and you can listen something and see some highlights, but you first see the text full page. So the user experience is not the same at all, even if the formats that we create now are sort of bijective, in fact, because this synchronized media structure could be used also as a replacement of media overlays for a text with some audio behind. So the technique is bijective, but the user experience is not at all. So audiobooks are still audiobooks. That's it.
Yeah.
So there are some a bit more technical questions that one from Ken Jones, who have seen during the demonstration of Thorium by Daniel Weck, that Daniel was using something called .audiobook. So the extensions was audiobook, not LPF. And so it's an internal extension that we've got, but really currently the formal extension for W3C audiobooks is .lpf. So I can answer it immediately. There was a question about can we navigate sentence by sentence like in a DAISY book? So we have seen during the presentation that yes, it has the same power of navigating sentence by sentence. So in summary, do you still see something in the DAISY talking book format that the LPF audiobook format doesn't have? A feature.
It's a great question. It really hinges on the implementation of the sync media specification. Last time I checked, it wasn't currently on the W3C track. We're very hopeful that it will be rolled out with the LPF specification, because that's a really important part of not just phrase navigation granularity, but so many other things that we're talking about to make this a fully streamlined application. As long as that is done, Farah, are you aware of anything that's critically missing from the new format?
No, as far as I'm aware, it can offer the exact same functionality as a DAISY book. Like you said, it hinges on the implementation of the synchronized narration guidelines as well. Yeah, I don't see, I mean, I think we're heading in the right direction here. Just like we did with EPUB, now we have a format that is mainstream and can be accessible.
Just to rebound on what Danny said about this synchronized media format, which is not on the recommendation track for now at W3C. The explanation is simple. It has been done by a small group of people, and this group of people, essentially Marisa and people from DAISY, and Daniel Weck was part of it also, thought that, well, there were not enough people around the table to finalize this and make it the recommendation. So we, W3C members, are expecting other people, including Nels, to come on the table, finalize in collaboration this specification so that it can be moved on the recommendation track as the audiobook format. So let's hope that we will be soon enough people around the table to finalize that.
Let's
Yes,
do it.
for sure.
So I think that we have gone through all the questions that the audience were asking. So now, new question. So if an EPUB is released with pre-recorded audio, would you listen to that sound, or rather prefer to have the text read aloud with your own preferred synthetic speech?
That is an awesome question. Do you want to tackle it, Ferry? Do you want me to?
I mean, I think that's a personal preference, I would say, whether someone prefers to listen to a human voice over a synthetic voice.
Yesterday we had Marion Berthaud from Movidis, and she has made some tests for dyslexic people, in fact, and dyslexic young people, usually dyslexic children. And in fact, she sees that there is a preference which comes with the age. Very young children, they really can't stand a synthetic voice.
Yep.
And when they grew older, they can accept it, and it is better. So it depends of, yes, as you said, it depends of, well, it's a natural preference.
Yeah, people learn differently. They have different preferences. In our experience, it's quite personal. We get requests for audiobooks specifically for synthetic voice. They don't want volunteers narrating the book, and then vice versa.
So I guess the bottom line is, if you have a book that has text and human narration, you're golden.
Yeah. Because, yeah, if you have the text there, readers can choose to use their own voice to read it and ignore your audio files if they want, I suppose.
But I would never do that.
That defeats the purpose of an audiobook. Yes.
Okay, well, thank you very much, both of you, for having prepared this wonderful presentation. I thank all the audience of these 2 long weeks of sessions, interrelated sessions, as you have seen, because it's about strategy, it's about technical stuff, usage, accessibility, protection. So we cover as much ground as we can. And we hope to be able to see you next year in live, and maybe in Madrid, some of you will be able to come if we can organize something, what we call a boutique edition, something live for working groups. So face-to-face only, because some things can't be achieved virtually. So small groups working and discussing some very specialized topics. So we will see if we can meet in November in Madrid. If not, it will be next year around June. So thank you very much, everybody, and have a nice weekend.
Thank you, Laurent.
Thank you. Thank you for having us. Hopefully we'll talk more soon about audiobooks at the table.
I hope, yes. Goodbye.
Bye.